fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene.
Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Falstaff and Henry V, and a whole host of other wonderful characters created in the mind and imagination of the world's greatest playwright, William Shakespeare. We're here today at Morgan Hill's public access TV station to talk to William Shakespeare, who's here in California to talk about the Northern California Renaissance Fair, which starts on the weekend of September 18th. Master Shakespeare, will you tell us how a young lad from Stratford-upon-Avon came to London and became the world's most prominent playwright?
I was born there upon a river of language, a very fountain of words that drew me in irresistibly. The English language was flowering at the time, and it delighted me so I could not resist it. From the sermons in church, which were again being taught in English with the ascension to the throne of our gracious sovereign Elizabeth, instead of Latin, were beautiful. And the Book of Common Prayer, which came out at the time, delighted me as a child. And also when my father was bailiff in Stratford and was in charge of licensing the traveling troops of players, I met some of them. And they made their living by words, which I simply could not resist.
I believe you were a big fan of the Roman poet Ovid. How maybe did Ovid affect your writing, influence your writing?
Well, I drew inspiration for many of my plays from his Metamorphoses. There was an availability with the spread of the printing press, translations of Seneca, Plutarch, and Ovid, a lot of the Greek and Roman writers.
You wrote for a very diverse audience. I mean, you wrote for royalty on the high level of the court, and also for the lowest common man. How did you make plays that could do the whole spectrum of humanity?
I wrote for humanity. I wrote plays about people, for people. Yeah, there were plays that were done only at court, and plays we did at the Globe that would not have been welcomed at court. But for the most part, by focusing on the people at the heart of each story, I made plays that I think speak to everyone.
Some of your plays, there's comedies, there's tragedies, and there's histories. What would you say is your favorite comedy?
Oh, I do love All My Children. So I'm very partial to As You Like It. As You Like It, I feel I came the closest to speech as a form of music, almost. And the character of Rosalind is delightful. It was a prose poem by Nash, I believe, the core story that I expanded. And I feel, a turnabout on the standard love story, with Rosalind leading Orlando through the maze of love, as it were, the forest.
Oh, yeah. Well, my favorite would be the Midsummer Night's Dream, where you had a clash of the real world, of the royal family, and then the fantasy world of the fairies. And I enjoy the comedy of the mechanicals, and they're trying to put on a play to entertain the court. So, what would you say is your favorite history play?
I do like the two parts of Henry IV. I find you were speaking of the world of the court and the world of the commoner. In Henry IV, you have the two poles of society, as it were, the king and his court at the top, and at the bottom these petty thieves and ne'er-do-wells. And so connected in Prince Hal, I like the way that they're contrasted.
Yeah. Oh, and you have one of your greatest characters, Falstaff.
Yes, very popular.
Can you tell us how you were inspired to create the character of Falstaff? Where did that emerge from? Somebody you knew, or?
There's many, many people I knew. Now, there was a family called Oldcastle, and the character was originally called Oldcastle, and they took some umbrage at that. But Falstaff is more of a force, an archetype, than any single person. He is all that is bad in a man, made charming.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe him. So, and in terms of maybe your favorite tragedy that you've written, what would that be?
Well, it does have to be Hamlet.
Hamlet?
Hamlet, yes. Hamlet was, but damn near killed me, frankly. I've never written so many lines, but it's a
4-hour play.
Most people don't do it all.
No.
However, it carried me along, and that was in in exploring what could be done in what was a fairly standard revenge play.
Yeah. I mean, it could be considered a whodunit, but there's so many different levels of psychology that Hamlet goes through and other characters go through. And I believe you wrote it during a very dark time in your own life. Your son Hamlet died previous to that. Is that correct?
He did, and that was very sad. And I never did see my children enough, with them living in Stratford and me living in London.
That was hard on you.
Professionally, it was very hard.
Yeah.
And it was a turbulent time in the country.
Yeah. Well, the worries that a father far away from London, or far away from his family in London, worries about the plague or how his families are surviving. So
it was, and that was another year. There was the threat of invasion from Spain that fortunately never materialized. There was war in Ireland.
One of your fellow, I guess, companion playwrights, Christopher Marlowe.
Kit.
Yes, interesting character. He wrote some great plays before he was tragically, left this world. Maybe tell us about the relationship you had with him, a rivalry, but a friendship too?
Oh, we were never rivals. If we strove to outdo each other, it was simply in common service to a shared muse. Marlowe was a great inspiration to me. His Tamburlaine and his Dr. Faustus started to show what could be accomplished on the English stage if we broke free of the rather rigid confines of drama before that. And he obviously, as you know, educated at Cambridge, part of a circle of very well-educated young gentlemen. We had very little connection until shortly before he was unfortunately killed. But no, never rivals. I like to think that we were yoke mates.
Yeah.
We labored together in the traces of drama. And together I think we did more than either of us could have done without the other.
What was, I guess, your relationship to the Elizabethan court? You probably wrote plays especially for the Queen and the court.
I did Merry Wives of Windsor. Her Majesty was kind enough to request that specifically. She was so delighted with the character of Falstaff.
Oh, yeah.
Love's Labour's Lost was written for the court. Twelfth Night was written for a Twelfth Night pageant.
I have a theory that some of your plays were written as kind of subtle, maybe warnings or subtle messages to the society of the time in terms of, well, like Othello. There was some racism in London in terms of the black people in London. And also I have a theory that Romeo and Juliet is not really a love story. It's a very political story. It's a warning about the Protestant and Catholic conflict of that time and how two houses of Rona were really two houses in England. Would you maybe care to comment on that theory?
You're going to get me in trouble.
Uh-oh. It's my intention.
I don't think of them as messages. The play is something I am exploring every bit as much as the audience, and I am exploring through the issues of our day in every play. Now, you spoke about Othello. There weren't really any black people in London or England. Very few foreigners, in fact, and those kept in certain quarters. It was a very restrictive time in some ways compared to the society you live in. You couldn't travel without a permit, really. You so as an inspiration in the Romeo and Juliet, at least you talked about, I think there's any number of areas where you could portray a division that are both concerned with the common welfare. Certainly along religious lines would be one.
You also wrote many sonnets. I can't remember how many sonnets, but quite a few sonnets.
Many.
And there was the mystery for, well, at least my age, the Dark Lady. Would you care to tell us who the Dark Lady was, or is that kind of a still a secret?
No, I'm afraid I wouldn't.
Oh.
Some things I feel are better left behind a veil, especially for married gentlemen.
Especially your wife, Anne Hathaway.
Yes.
You were younger than her by about maybe 10 years or so?
Not so much 10. I was 18 and she was 26.
How'd you meet?
We met in Stratford. She lived nearby. Her orphaned, unfortunately, but her family had been very prominent.
And what's the thing about the second best bed in the will that you had?
But that was the bed I used.
Ah.
The best bed, of course, is for company.
Ah, so you kept the best bed, you know, basically clean and nice and tidy, and it was the second best bed would be kind of a memory of your experience with her.
Exactly.
So, in terms of movies, are you familiar with the modern art entertainment form of movies?
I've heard some fascinating descriptions.
Yeah. It's a kind of a magic show where a projector sends a beam of light to a flat screen, and a world is created, you know, on a two-dimensional level. And we have many great playwrights who also write for the movies. One of our greatest playwrights, Tom Stoppard, wrote a play called Shakespeare in Love, which
I beg your pardon.
which is about you in our time. It's fiction, of course, but it's about your experience falling in love and writing Romeo and Juliet. So, do you think you would like to write for this art form?
From what I've heard, I would. I was quoting from the prologue of Henry V. The section later in there says, "Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? May we cram within this wood know the very casques that did affright the air at Agincourt?" Well, in the movies you can. So I think the opportunities for the writer are literally huge. The spectacle one can present and the scope one could say.
Well, we have what we call computer or graphics, and we can create basically brand new worlds and fantastic worlds. And I think that would be a great form of for you to create, you know, worlds that you could not put in your stage because of the practical limitations. But the screen would definitely be a place for you to do that.
There would be an interest to it. I could never abandon the stage entirely. There is a power and an intimacy that comes from the living actor, and a magic that comes with having every performance be different, because if nothing else is different than the audience is.
Yeah. And also, I mean, the theater is really living on the edge. You're doing it right there, and you know, if there's a mistake that's made, you know, you just carry on and follow through. So.
With a stage play, I like to think that the audience and the cast are all in it together.
Yeah. There's that camaraderie, I guess, between the cast and the audience. So.
Absolutely.
We actually have here in Morgan Hill a festival from short movie films called the Poppy Jasper Film Festival. And on November 12th, 13th, and 14th, it'll be held here in Morgan Hill. So if you're interested in maybe pursuing some of that, I encourage you, Mr. Shakespeare, to maybe check out our short film festival.
Yes, will there be producers there? I could bring a script.
There will be many producers. And we're planning to have Luis Valdez, who we consider here in America the Chicano Shakespeare. He wrote some plays for the El Teatro Campesino theater down in San Juan Bautista, but he's also written and produced and directed some plays, or from some movies, Zoot Suit and La Bamba, which is about the Hispanic culture. But you're here in California to promote a certain Renaissance Fair, the Northern California
I'm here to attend the Northern California Renaissance Fair.
Let's chat about that a little bit. And what is so special about this Renaissance Fair?
It is the celebration of the spirit of a great age. It is a delight of language and music and laughter. I once wrote "All the World's a Stage," and at the Renaissance Fair it truly is. Everywhere you go is part of the performance, speaking of the cast and the audience all being together. And there are fine wares to buy, and you can talk to the craftspeople who made many of them.
Oh, yeah.
Good food and drink, of course.
Hearty English food.
Hearty English food and good ale to keep it down.
Well, I've been several years, and I think it's an exciting time to come to, or exciting event to come to, and enjoy an exciting time in human history. You walk through those gates, and suddenly you're transformed into a new place and a new world.
Which is, ironically, an old place.
Yes.
But yes.
Yeah. An old place in the new world.
Well put.
So who might we meet there? What famous historical figures might be gracing the fair this year?
Well, I'll be there, of course. But speaking of gracing the fair, Her Grace the Queen is in Wellington on Progress.
Good Queen Beth.
And with her travels the court and all of the luminaries. The Earl of Leicester, Sir Walter Raleigh. Sir Francis Drake, I hear, has put ashore and may well be there. Some of my fellow poets may also attend, although I don't know for sure yet.
Christopher Marlowe or Ben Jonson?
Probably not Johnson. Bit of a
What, okay, let's see what this thing between you and Johnson is. What happened between you and Ben Johnson? Or should I ask?
I don't think you should.
Uh-oh.
Really, it's a celebration.
Yeah.
Keep it pleasant.
Okay. Well, definitely we'll encourage people to go. In fact, would it be a great place to take young people, families?
It is a fantastic place to bring our children. Children love the Renaissance Fair. And we so encourage it that all children 12 and under get in for free for the entire run of the fair.
What a deal.
Absolutely. There are more deals. The first weekend is 2 for 1 with a coupon readily available on something called a website.
Oh, yeah. So it was invented, I think, up the road from Morgan Hill in a place called Silicon Valley.
Splendid.
So in terms of maybe food or some of the entertainment, could you maybe go into more detail on that? What kind of food can we enjoy at the festival?
Well, there's fine hearty fare. There are meat pies and sausage rolls. The turkey leg is very popular.
Very messy to eat too.
Well, good food should be messy. It's a visceral experience. I myself like a nice shepherd's pie. And I'm very partial to what is called sin on a stick.
Sin on a stick?
Cheesecake, frozen, dipped in chocolate and eaten from a stick.
That is sinful.
It is. Although I also admit to a great partiality to an ale stand now and then. For entertainment, there are fine singers, good players. There's a very amusing show called Manly Men in Tights, containing instruction for all the burgeoning gentlemen. The Sea Dogs of St. Dimphar, I believe, will be there.
The what?
The Sea Dogs of St. Dimphar, a singing group of sailors, as it were, who sing nautical songs. And the occasional naughty song, I'm told. I wouldn't ever think about that.
It sounds like there's appropriate entertainment for the kids, but some that maybe kids might not want to, families might want to let their kids go to.
There isn't much along those lines, but what there is very clearly marked.
That's good.
All on a single stage. So
sounds like a fun time. And
it is a marvelous time.
Yeah. So what do you think of California in terms of, this is your first time here, I assume? Or?
It is. It's very hot.
Is it hot?
Isn't it? Yeah. But it is beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I spent some time living in England and London, and I fell in love with Shakespeare plays and the theater.
Right. Thank you very
And
much.
I lived in Highgate, London, and I would take the tube to the National Theatre and very often watch great performances that you had in the English theater there.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed them.
Yeah. So maybe there's some lessons that you can share with us in terms of how maybe the Elizabethan world can share lessons with our modern world.
Well, I think for us there was so much that was new and was changing, and people were, in some way, very open to new ideas and to re-examining some of the old ones. And I think that is always a virtue.
Sounds a lot like Silicon Valley. I mean, we're here a very open society in terms of ideas, and if you fall on your face, at least you gave it a shot. So.
Now that sounds like acting.
Yeah. So, well, any final things you might want to say about the theater and also the Renaissance Fair?
Apparently not.
Okay. And we'll close the show. Well, thank you so much, Master Shakespeare, for joining us here in Morgan Hill.
For this welcome, much thanks.
So.